What's going on, y'all? Welcome back to the Cover 3 College Ball Podcast. I'm Bud Elliott. That's Andrew Ivins. That means this is the recruiting hour. Ivins, what's going on, dude?
Not much, Bud. 5 weeks away from the early signing period, aka signing day, and I think it's just going to get crazy, right? This coaching carousel spinning. We entered this football season, right? Like the entire top 247, everyone had made commitments. Now we're seeing a lot of movement, and I think as new staffs get into place, it's shaping up for a crazy final stretch until pen meets paper. I don't think anyone actually signs anything before the DocuSign is submitted and sent via an app.
Man, I'm excited to see some of these flips we might have on deck. And one, our buddy Barton Simmons had this kid in town, 5-star quarterback Jared Curtis, visiting Vandy. You saw Nate, the comedian there on game day, shouting him out multiple times, trying to get him to flip from UGA. We have had some like pretty big QB flips in the past. It's not a position I think that flips quite as often, but when it does, it is usually around a coaching change. I don't think any coaching change is imminent at UGA or Vandy, but obviously some playing time and maybe an attractive offense to play in for Curtis there at Vandy. Give me the deets on this. What are we thinking?
Well, yeah, Tom Lloyd at 24/7 Sports has kind of been all over this, and came across my desk late last week. Hey, Vanderbilt involved with Jared Curtis, who, like you said, is a 5-star quarterback, right? And he's going to be in the conversation for QB1 here in the 2026 cycle. I mean, this kid is the real deal. Now he goes to school right there in Nashville. And Bud, to me, this makes a ton of sense for Vanderbilt to kind of not like kick the tires, but try to push all the chips in on Jared Curtis, because Diego Pavia, the pit bull, he's gone after this season, assuming something doesn't happen, in the court system. And for Vanderbilt, which is in the national spotlight, which just hosted College Game Day, which is now favored against all this SEC competition, how do they stay relevant? How do they stay in the spotlight? I think going after a guy like Jared Curtis makes all the sense in the world. And Vanderbilt, if I'm Barton Simmons or I'm Clark Lee and people inside that football building, I think you go to the donor base and said, hey, if we want to keep us, at the top in the spotlight, in the college football playoff conversation, then we got to make some noise. And Jared Curtis, apparently, from what Tom Loy and others have reported, is at least listening to what Vanderbilt has to offer. He was there in town on campus Saturday for the win over Missouri. Tom Loy also reported there was another visit, maybe for a practice. Now, with that being said, Georgia, Mike Bobo, they continue to press all of the right buttons. Mike Bobo was at Jared Curtis's game this past Friday. So, a lot to unpack here, Bud. The thing that I've been saying for a while, hey, you look at the past 3 recruiting cycles, a 5-star quarterback has flipped late to a different school. Last cycle, it was Bryce Underwood. Remember, he was all LSU, ends up in Michigan. The year before that, it was Dylan Raiola. It was, Georgia. All of a sudden, he ends up at Nebraska. And then Dante Moore, the year prior to that, Oregon. All of a sudden, he's headed to UCLA. Now he's back with the Ducks. But we have seen these high-profile arms in this name, image, likeness era, kind of have a change of heart at the last second.
It'd be interesting to see how he would fit in this offense. Man, I don't think he's quite the runner, that Pavia is, but obviously a really talented thrower, and I think Tim Beck's an excellent offensive coordinator. And you got to think about path to playing time as well, right?
Yeah, but and I would kind of push back on that. Like Jared Curtis is a kid who played running back in the youth leagues. Like he grew up as
that's a hell of a highlight right there.
Yeah, and he's a power runner, right? And
which Pavia is too.
Exactly. Now, is he going to be Diego? I mean, are you going to run him 30 times a game? Probably not, but you can utilize him on the design calls. And the thing is, he throws a beautiful deep ball, right? He can make high-level throws, easy exit velocity, right? Upper body, can make, throws off platform. And I think the biggest thing with Jared Curtis, and really you've seen it here as a senior. Now, Nashville Christian facing a lower level of competition there in Tennessee. But he plays with some swagger, right? Like, just updated his scouting report on 247sports.com this morning. Like, there is a chip on Jared Curtis's shoulder. And when they've been on the biggest stages, when they've leveled up in competition and faced some defenses that have, fellow Power 4 talent, Jared Curtis has been the X factor. So, could he be the day one starter for Vandy if he were to flip? I think absolutely, right? Because you said it, Tim Beck, he can kind of cater that offense where Jared Curtis doesn't have to be the guy at all times. He can certainly, maybe by season's end kind of break through. But, when you compare him to Bryce Underwood, who has started day one at Michigan, when you compare him to Dylan Raiola, who started day one there at Nebraska, like, very similar to those guys. Jared Curtis is going to exit high school with 50 starts under his belt. He's a 4-year starter. So, again, I think for Vandy, it makes sense to kind of stay relevant by going after this guy, because if it's not Jared Curtis, then they're likely going to be looking in the transfer portal. And, if Jared Curtis were to pick Vanderbilt, Bud, think about it. He instantly becomes everything. When you mention Vandy, it's going to be Jared Curtis, right? And he's going to be kind of up there on the Mount Rushmore of quarterbacks for the Commodores. It's going to be Diego Pavia, it's going to be Jay Cutler, and it's going to be Jared Curtis. And he hasn't even played a snap. So, I think this is certainly a major, major development at the top of the board.
Yeah, I mean, you got to think, okay, they've improved the roster so much at Vandy, right? It's not just Pavia, but Pavia is a major part of their improvement. And you would expect some drop-off at the position when he goes, just because of how competitive he is, like the edge he plays with, how perfect of a fit he is for that offense. But, man, I guess you really hadn't thought about what if they do better? And as a thrower, like, Curtis's ceiling is much higher than Diego. Now, granted, I think the floor is much lower, just given that we know what Diego's floor represents. But, if they could get better, maybe they don't have to drop off somewhat. A lot of people thought they'd drop off this year, and I was like, where's this roster worse, right? This is a better team than it was last year. So, really interested to see that. Other potential flip situations to monitor. So, Keyshawn Henderson is committed, kid from Houston, committed to Houston. Houston having an awesome year under Willie Fritz, but I think really a year earlier than most predicted after their roster got picked over pretty good in the transfer portal. Willie Fritz just an absolute magician at finding ways to win. But Keyshawn is a guy who is committed to Houston. They're all in as far as the NIL stuff. They're trying to surround him as well. They're a ranked team, and this is just such a cool story in the NIL era. You just wouldn't have this happen prior. I mean, I know Houston got Ed Oliver, about a decade ago or so, but that's pretty rare, and that's not a 5-star quarterback. So can they keep him? Do we have to keep watching this?
Yeah, right. So, I try to jot down some 5-star flip watch candidates. Obviously, Jared Curtis is the one that's in the media for good reason, as we just explained. But the one I've always kind of, kept my thumb on is Keyshawn Henderson. And that's because, as you noted, Bud, I mean, he's headed to a Big 12 school. He's the number 2 player in the top 247, and he too could finish as quarterback 1. And, I think when he committed to Willie Fritz and the Cougars, I mean, he was not a household name. He had yet to really emerge on the national recruiting scene. We thought he was a wide receiver or a safety. Since then, he was MVP of the Navy All-American Bowl. He has turned heads at the Elite 11 finals. He has shown much more as a passer and a runner as a senior. And to me, I think he's a game breaker, right? I think, Jaden Daniels, Lamar Jackson, that's the type of talent you're getting with Keyshawn Henderson. Now, I'm not saying he's a first-round pick. He's a lock, but plays a similar style of game, right? He can move around, make dynamic movements in the pocket, and also make high-level throws. So, yes, he is committed to Houston, which, as you pointed out, number 22 in the latest AP top 25 poll. They're 7-1 under Willie Fritz. They've done it with a lot of transfers since Fritz has arrived there in the Space City. That's where they've leaned heavily. But Houston's recruiting class, man, they got some guys. They are surrounding Keyshawn Henderson with some playmakers that he's familiar with. And I think that's so important because the coaching carousel, crazy already, going to get crazier. I think Keyshawn Henderson is going to be a very, very attractive target for some of these head coaches that take over at the Blue Bloods, right? LSU, what is their long-term plan at quarterback? Keyshawn was linked at times to Joe Sloan and Brian Kelly. So that's one. What happens if Texas opens up with Steve Sarkisian? That is an in-state kid. Like, Keyshawn Henderson has the talent, and he is going to be a potential splash addition for a new regime at one of these power broker schools. I think he's all Houston. Everything you read, everyone you talk with at 24/7 Sports, Mike Roach, Tom Loy, Keyshawn Henderson continues to say all the right things.
Yeah.
I think he's aware that they got guys around him, really like the H-back they have committed in Javion Martin. I think he's a high-volume target. Jaden Warren's a wide receiver that can get deep. And their running back, John Hebert, past 21 games, this kid has ran for close to 6,000 yards and 64 touchdowns. So they have surrounded Keyshawn Henderson with some potential playmakers, but what happens once we get some of these coaches in new places? Because again, you're trying to win a press conference, you're trying to win the offseason. Keyshawn Henderson would certainly be a statement for someone.
He really would. I don't know who your comp is for him. I always kind of thought Randall Cunningham. You know what I mean? Like, a guy is like a legit runner, but he does want to be a thrower, and it. I don't like. He's special, man. People want to follow him. It's really, really impressive.
Yeah, but he's one of the best leaders I've been around. Like, he is a gravitating personality. At that Navy All-American Bowl, right? NBC, we had some pre-production meetings. I tell this story all the time, but these are a bunch of on-air talent that cover the Olympics and various sporting events. And they were just shocked and blown away by Keyshawn Henderson holding court for 15 minutes. I mean, I asked him, hey, who's your favorite receiver to throw to? He sat there and, broke down every receiver on the roster with a full detailed scouting report. It was very, very impressive. And, someone that can be a force multiplier, right? He's going to get the most out of his teammates. I said it, my player comp, like, I know it sounds ridiculous, like Jaden Daniels, Lamar Jackson, like, I think he is that type of athlete. And, Gabe Brooks on our scouting team, he says Jordan Love. So we're all over the place. But here's the thing. We all really, really like his ceiling. So
Texas, obviously, Sark had his agency shoot down that rumor last week, or the report. I don't have any reason to think the report's false, but a lot of reason to think that they didn't want that out there, true or not. So he had his agency shoot that down. They have Diabell committed, a guy who obviously had to shut it down for his senior year here in the state of Florida so he can get healthy and compete for the job there immediately in Austin. At least that's kind of what some sources had told me. Do we think Texas can hold on to him? I know Notre Dame's been after him a little bit. Florida State, given FSU's situation right now, I have had a hard time seeing that happening. But do you think he's rock solid to Texas?
Yeah, but this is the third five-star quarterback that I think, you at least got to keep an eye on, right? And I wouldn't put Diabell on flip watch, but what happens with Steve Sarkisian? And that's, this isn't the hour to speculate on all of that, but what has stuck out to me about Diabell, and I know you had him and his father on Cover 3 after he won MVP at the Elite 11 finals. Like, Raja told me after Diabell's season opener, where he led this like furious comeback, that some schools were still in contact with Diabell, which I found surprising because they seem to be all in on the Longhorns. I mean, he committed to them before his junior season. He went out to Austin. He threw at their elite quarterback camp alongside a bunch of other blue chippers, and he was essentially handpicked by Steve Sarkisian. This was the quarterback of the future, but it seems like they've at least not shut the door on other schools. Notre Dame's an interesting one, right? I've heard that multiple times. Notre Dame does have a quarterback committed, but Marcus Freeman seems to have taken Notre Dame's talent acquisition to a different level. And I think Diabell has a higher ceiling, has a higher floor than the guy that they already have committed in the 2026 class. So, would Notre Dame make a move if Sarkisian were to leave to be, the head coach of the Tennessee Titans or something like that? I think you need to track that. And same thing applies with, okay, Florida's open. We know a new coach is going to come in there. Florida State could potentially open. I mean, there's just a lot of moving parts. And, Dia not playing as a senior, as you noted, dealing with an injury for the second season in a row. But the player comp for him has been Dante Moore. Extremely smooth from a mechanical standpoint, on time, very accurate, can create with his legs. So he's going to be attractive as well to, some of these coaches that find themselves with a new zip code in the coming months.
No doubt about it. If you got Diabella, that would make a big time splash. All right. So obviously something we were going to lead the show with, and still going to be largely the meat of this show. LSU decided to pull the trigger and fire Brian Kelly. Let's kind of get into his departure, what LSU needs to do here as far as from a recruiting standpoint, who they hire, what is the model going to look like? But man, I got to start with the top. The kid who LSU fans were basically begging to stay, and that's 5-star defensive lineman Lamar Brown, who LSU beat the Aggies for his commitment, obviously, and A&M beat the brakes off LSU in Tiger Stadium on Saturday night. What are we thinking there?
Well, Lamar Brown is by far one of the most unique players I've ever scouted. I've said it in the past. He's got round one ceiling as an offensive lineman and round one ceiling as a defensive lineman. We legitimately are probably going to list him as a 285-pound athlete, and that's a 285-pound athlete that could finish as the number one player in the country. I think everyone sees defensive line. With that being said, Bud, watched his cut-ups late last night. Lamar Brown's playing a lot more offense than he is defense here as a senior. He's at University Lab High School. That is in the shadows of LSU.
Literally.
But they scrimmaged like a preseason action was inside LSU's IPF. You see Lamar Brown out there throwing people around, and there's a Tiger logo right below him. With that being said, go back to the summer before Lamar Brown made his decision. There was a lot of people in College Station that felt optimistic. They felt like, they led in the recruitment. They thought up until, the hour before Lamar Brown put on that huge oversized LSU hat on SportsCenter that, they might pick up that pledge. So for LSU, I mean, disaster of a scenario, I think on Saturday, obviously, losing, right? But if you want to take a step back and look at the big picture, the recruiting section inside Tiger Stadium was loaded, right? It was a who's who. Lamar Brown, as you pointed out, was there, but there was a ton of other 5- and 4-star prospects. And what did they see in the second half? They saw fans booing, right? It was not a good environment. So I don't know if Texas A&M is going to turn up the heat on Lamar Brown. I think they've kind of made their pitch here. Hey, we developed defensive linemen. I think that was very clear Saturday night. We have more stability, and we're going to potentially play for a national championship. I think everything that Texas A&M sold Lamar Brown on has rung true, and everything that they probably negatively recruited towards LSU has probably also rung true. So we'll see what happens. I think this one will go down to the wire, and I think a lot of it's going to hinge on who LSU tabs as Brian Kelly's replacement. The best in the boot, stay in the boot. It's a very, very weird state in the sense that Nick Saban is the only coach that I think has had that really had sustained success of going into Louisiana and pulling guys away from LSU. There's a lot of pressure for those kids to stay home. LSU was Lamar Brown's first scholarship offer. Again, probably doesn't have to change much of his morning routine going from University Lab to classes at LSU. So one to certainly track. And I think if there's a team to watch, it's definitely Texas A&M.
I muted myself. Oops. I totally agree on that. If you look at this, I mean, I think they're going to have a good shot to hold on to them because you can't lose this kid, right? The new coach coming in has got to say, hey, whatever it takes, back up the Brinks truck. Let's just get this one done, right? And you probably have to overpay a little bit, but it's just such a bad look if you're the new coach coming in. You just cannot afford to lose the kid in your backyard there.
And the other thing too, Bud, is like, again, I think opinions are a little split on where you position Lamar Brown. Like, now, is there a scenario where we could have like Lamar Brown be a Travis Hunter and he gets snaps on both sides of the ball? Potentially, maybe. I mean, if there was a player that could do it, it's probably Lamar Brown. I mean, we went back and we looked, and we tried to find point of attack players that have gone both ways in college. I think one of the only ones I found was Mike Pouncey, former Florida center guard, right? He got some burn on defense at some point during his career just due to injuries and attrition. So I don't know where, the next LSU staff's going to see Lamar Brown. But here's the thing. After watching what took place on Saturday night inside Tiger Stadium, I don't think it matters where you line him up because he's going to be a difference maker. The other thing on top of this, Bud, is it's not just Lamar Brown, right? LSU has one of the top defensive line groups in the country committed. Whoever comes in, they got to hold on to these individuals because I think that is the root of LSU's problems, right? Up front in the trenches, specifically on the interior. And, LSU brought in a transfer portal class with Pat Payton, Jack Byburn, a few other guys. Still think, they haven't matched the level of previous, frontline defenders for the Tigers. And, Richard Anderson is a kid out of New Orleans, Edna Carr. He's going to be in the 5-star conversation for us. He's a big stump in the middle, right? And as much as we gush about Lamar Brown, Richard Anderson is going to have a chance to make just as much of an impact up front wherever he ends up. Trenton Henderson, a 5-star edge rusher out of Florida's Panhandle. They got to keep him on board. One of the sleepers they have committed, DeAnthony Lafayette, right here in Orlando, Bud. I think this kid's a stud, right? He's maybe 6 feet tall, but he can rush, crush, and close. And then the other one, Deuce Gerald's out of the Atlanta Metro, just I believe set the GSHSA record with 51 career sacks. Kind of reminds me a little bit of Drazon Newton, who was at Illinois, right? He's this, quick twitch interior pass rusher, also plays some running back. So LSU, they got a lot of issues, but I think they need to figure out a way to keep all these defensive linemen in the fold because they all have multi-year starter upside in the SEC.
Absolutely. So another guy they got to figure out is who the heck's going to play quarterback because, they signed Ricky Collins, who went to Syracuse and, it's just not any good. They signed Colin Hurley. I was never I don't think you totally write off Colin Hurley based on what you saw in high school because there was some certain physical abilities, but I was usually a little bit underwhelmed relative to some of the hype on him when you saw him at certain events, especially under pressure. They get Van Buren, who had some a nice cup of coffee with Mississippi State last year. Now he's the backup. He had to come in a little bit when Nussmeier got dinged. Is LSU starter for 2026 on their roster? Do they believe in any of these guys? And they also don't have a 2026 high school kid committed right now.
Yeah, as much as I just talked about the problems on the defensive line, that's my big question. What is the plan at quarterback, Bud? And I know you probably know a lot more LSU people than I do. And I just don't see what the plan is for next season and then beyond. And how did this happen? Right? Jaden Daniels won a Heisman Trophy in Baton Rouge not too long ago. Joe Burrow has been there.
And Nussmeier's going to get drafted.
Correct. And all these quarterback recruits are attracted to LSU. I don't know if it's a mismanagement. I don't know where, things have gone wrong. Actually, I do, Bud. I mean, Bryce Underwood, they thought they were going to get. It was a Bryce Underwood, and then they get left at the altar. And there didn't seem to really be, a backup plan. And that has bled into the 2026 recruiting cycle. And then 2027, Elijah Haven, 5-star quarterback, our number 2 player in the country, he also goes to school in Baton Rouge. But LSU took a pledge from another quarterback, Peyton Houston, in-state. I mean, a guy that can, is a fire hydrant. He can rip it around the yard. He's not the tallest, biggest individual. That's Elijah Haven. But it's just been fascinating to see, how this quarterback room has come together, because I think everything's going to change, right? With whoever steps in. And, to me, they're going to have to go after a transfer. If you don't think Van Buren's the guy, who, let's give him credit, he is kind of a gamer, right? He's exceeded expectations for me. I mean, he's a kid that took a lot of hits at St. Francis Academy, was really good in the Under Armour game. Did not see what he did as a freshman at Mississippi State there, but I think they need a high school guy, and I think they're going to go after one of the top transfers on the market.
I think it makes a ton of sense. Like they do recruit in-state pretty well. I know like opinions on all these in-state like Louisiana quarterbacks for 27 are just all over all over the board. Like you talk to somebody that they like this kid, they don't like that kid. Next guy loves the kid the other guy didn't like. So it like I don't know if there's a developing consensus yet. Like I know we like Haven. I think we like the makeup. He looked pretty good when we saw him, at the Future 50 event. But at the same time, like, I don't think he's in a like Trevor Lawrence can't miss. Like how in the hell do you let this kid walk out of the state category? Like he's not at this point in his career. Like he's not the replacement for Bryce Underwood. Which honestly, if LSU hangs on to Bryce Underwood, I'm pretty sure Brian Kelly's not fired.
Would Bryce Underwood be playing?
That's a great question. So it would sort of depend on like how hurt is Nussmeier, right?
Yeah.
Like he's not very effective right now. I mean, he's playing a little bit better. I think he's probably a little bit healthier, but I do think maybe at certain points in the year, Underwood would have received snaps. But also I think there would be pressure to play Underwood in a way that like Van Buren is not like a super high level talent. Like there's not a lot of pressure to play him. Like nobody in the fan base, there's no big donor out there be like, hey man, I paid all this money for Van Buren. I better see him get some snaps if Nussmeier is going to be hurt and not playing very well, right? With Underwood, there certainly would be. Like I think if you got a kid that talented, like the risk of making a coaching move is really risky if you're worried about losing the kid, right? It's probably why Sharon's going to get another year at Ann Arbor, despite them not really looking anything special this year. You just can't afford to fire the coach and have the kid transfer out. I think he would still have the job if they kept Underwood. Now maybe the defense wouldn't be improved because they had to spend their NIL money on Underwood and not on the transfer portal defense. But it's an interesting kind of hypothetical to ponder for sure.
Yeah, we used to always, I think they still do them. Chris Summer at 24/7 Sports, like the big recruiting what ifs.
Oh, Tebow to Alabama, obviously.
Yeah,
always, right.
But hey, this is shaping up to be a big one. The Bryce Underwood. The same thing, like Dylan Raiola to Nebraska. Like, what if he went to Georgia? What does Matt Rule look like in kind of year 3 there? Yeah, it's these quarterback. I mean, we call them quarterback dominoes, but that's really what they are because it changes the trajectory of the entire college football landscape. Bud, can we talk Texas A&M?
Yes. So let's talk about the winning team here. Texas A&M who went into Death Valley and put Brian Kelly out of business. And they're just developing a nice identity under Mike Elko. I think like they really understand who they are and do a great job recruiting to it. Which brings us to our GM of the week, Derek Miller of Texas A&M. And let's chat about Derek a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, to me, Bud, when you watch Texas A&M, you kind of know what they are, right? Like they're a hard-nosed football team. It is height, weight, speed across the board. And I think it gets easy to just label teams and operations as like, all right, like they're going to go after the guys with traits and the guys that play hard. Texas A&M is executing that, right? And they play with their hair on fire. I think especially on the defensive side of the ball, they're focused at the point of attack, and I think they have a schematical advantage on both offense and defense, right? They are getting the most out of the players they have. And what stands out to me about Texas A&M, and you look at their recruiting class in 2026. So that's the one that's going to sign in 5 weeks. It ranks number 5 nationally. You talk to some people inside those football offices and in the personnel department. But I think they're more excited about the guys at the bottom of the commit list than the guys at the top of the commit list. And to me, what that signals is this is a program that has it all together from an evaluation standpoint. They don't care about the rankings, right? Hey, we have a vision, we have a plan. This guy fits what we want to do, and we're going to go get them. So that was the case last cycle as well. We saw some of those guys make plays as true freshmen against the Tigers on Saturday night. I mean, Marco Jones, 3 pressures. I mean, that's an edge rusher that the Aggies went out to California to get, right? More of these guys are going to be in the lineup. The other thing, and the reason why Derek Miller and that entire operation deserves a ton of credit, is talk about some of these pieces they got in the transfer portal. I mean, Casey Concepcion, he has that huge punt return touchdown. TJ Searcy, who was at Florida, 2 sacks, right? Scoopy Williams, also big impact on Saturday night. Des Ricks, a transfer in from Alabama. I just think it's been an excellent kind of blend of transfer portal additions and high school recruiting, right? They're still developing from within. And to me, I know Marcel Reed was a holdover from the previous staff, but they put him in position to succeed, right? And he can be the X factor in certain moments. And I think the biggest thing is he's a dynamic mover, right? He can beat defenses with his legs. And I just think with how it's all come together, that roster vision, again, the culture, the identity, Texas A&M. If I'm AD at one of these other schools, I'm looking at Texas A&M. I'm looking at Vanderbilt. What do they all have in common? They got culture, identity, guys with traits, mobile quarterbacks. I mean, it's all right there in front of you.
I mean, I think part of this will be holding that coaching staff together, right? Like, Colin Klein has done such a nice job for them, calling it and helping to design, that offense. But I do think with Mike Elko at the helm and the resources that A&M has, like, they should be able to continue to, to kill it, right? Like, you mentioned that they're pretty high on Kasuga, the quarterback, coming in after Marcel Reed. Is Marcel Reed a senior, or does he have another year? Because I don't think he's like an early NFL guy.
I think he's got another year. You want to know a fun fact, bud?
Yeah, we got
a friend texted me about Marcel Reed, and I don't. Maybe it was the first time that they got a good taste of Marcel Reed. They're like, "Man, this kid's super skinny," and I'm like, "Yep, that like."
Mm-hmm.
To me, Marcel Reed is the definition of what we call in the scouting world, like a hard gainer. I mean, he is tight skinned, doesn't have a ton of bone density, doesn't have broad shoulders. And at the same time, him being so lean is, I think, what makes him what he is, just his agility in the pocket. But I went and I looked it up, and this is in the UC report, right? A database that dates back to 2016. I only found 3 other quarterbacks that were lighter than Marcel Reed that signed with Power 4 programs. One of them was Jaden Daniels. The other guys haven't even started. I think one of them was Tutu Atwell, who was committed to play quarterback at FAU, went to Louisville. Now he's in the league as like this gadget player. So he is like the exception to the exception. But Marcel Reed makes it work. Again, like he delivers in key moments, and it's been fun to watch his rise. A guy we had as a 4-star prospect. I don't think any of us expected this, but what he was able to do in high school has translated to college. And as you noted, Colin Klein kind of sets the table for him. The other thing with Texas A&M, Bud, is we just kind of downplayed the quarterback outlook for LSU. Like, Texas A&M's got a plan moving forward. Helman Kasuga is committed out of Utah. He's 8-1 as a senior after missing a good chunk of his junior year due to injury. He's mobile. Texas A&M loves him right now. Does he have NFL traits, NFL upside? I don't know about that. Guy that's played a lot of football. He beat IMG Academy as a junior in kind of a best-on-best setting before he got hurt. And then they're really excited about the kid they got committed in 2027. So that's a junior in high school, J.C. Johnson out of Valdosta. I think out of all the quarterbacks kind of in focus right now that are on my radar, like, this guy's the closest thing to Lenoris Sellers. So, think about Lenoris Sellers in Colin Klein's system, right? In terms of his ability to be a power runner and still make some big time throws. So, yeah, GM of the week, Derek Miller. And really it's that entire operation, everyone from Mike Elko at the top, but what they're doing I think they got an identity, and that's a big reason, why they're likely going to be playing for an SEC championship and potentially a national championship.
I think they're also a school that, I mean, look, I had them projected number 2 in my college ball playoff rankings, for my weekly projection. Like, there's a chance they could be the number 1 overall seed. If you look at that resume, if they run the table, which they certainly could do. I mean, you get what Missouri's left, and Missouri has now a third-string quarterback, Zollers, who actually played pretty damn well for them, I thought, in a tough spot against Vanderbilt. You get Texas, and I just don't think Texas, they just don't block, right? I thought Arch kind of turned a corner 2 of the last 3 games, but they really just don't block anybody there this year, and the receivers are just kind of, they're not bad. They're kind of Jags by Texas standards,
And yeah, Texas might not block, but here's another thing that makes the Aggies like what they are is the depth and the rotation on the defensive line. They are 8 deep, and which is crazy to think about given what they lost to the NFL draft.
Yes. This is the most surprising thing I think about this A&M team this year, right? Like, Colin Klein designing an offense to hide some of Marcel Reed's processing issues, not totally surprising. We knew the upgraded receiver in the portal. Offensive line, that was an obvious, might be the best in the country type group. Like them, Notre Dame, Iowa, Miami were kind of like the maybe Bama preseason in the mix of on the short list of who could have the best O-line in the country, like a lot of NFL guys, a lot of returning experience, type thing. I did not see this defensive line coming in this way. And they're pretty good. I know they give up some points sometimes, but this group kind of rips, man.
Bud, remember when I don't know if you reported it on the Cover 3 back in the preseason,
yes,
or you were joking about it, about Shamar Stewart potentially coming back. Just going to say this. I'm under the impression that maybe Shamar Stewart, I don't know, he for sure had a spot at Texas A&M at the slotting for whatever, dollar figure he wanted. I think Texas A&M felt pretty good about the defensive line.
Yeah, I mean, think about the money they spent to get receiver. That's probably a smart move, not bringing Shamar Stewart back. Obviously, he ended up signing with the Bengals. So, is he playing, by the way?
Yeah, I saw him in pursuit the other night on Red Zone.
Okay, there you go. I really don't watch much NFL. I do, but not live very often. They're in a position here to close. By the way, there's some guys. So. Obviously, we talked about Lamar Brown. If you're watching this on a VOD, go watch the LSU VOD. If you're watching the full episode, make sure you give us that like and subscribe to the channel. We do try to talk recruiting here for about an hour a week on the Cover 3 podcast with Andrew Ivins. But Tank Jones, Braylon Womack, KJ Ford, if they finish number 1 or number 2 overall in the playoff ratings, I mean, regardless of what happens in the playoffs, signing days before any playoff games are played, dude, unleash the money cannon, because you got actual proof of success, proof of concept on the field, plus serious dollars. If you're willing to pay $70 million to buy out Jimbo Fisher, I think you're probably pretty willing to pay whatever it takes to land some of these guys to really capitalize on this number 1 or number 2 season.
So, Bud, this is a thought that came to me after Sunday, after the Brian Kelly news. 5 weeks till signing day, and I think what's very unique about this recruiting cycle is the fact that the coaching carousel is spinning at an all-time high. Guys have been let go way before they normally would have. Didn't it used to be like Black Monday after Thanksgiving? I mean, throw that out the window. Everyone just gets dismissed, before Halloween. And I'm sure athletic directors and schools are going to try to get head coaches in place, but the early signing period is extremely early this year, right? It is December 3rd.
Very early. Yeah.
I don't know how many schools are going to have coaches in place. So where my mind went is okay, who's in prime position to capitalize here on some uncertainty at your regular kind of power players? And I got 4 teams here. Let's start with Texas A&M, sitting number 5 right now in the recruiting class rankings. We've talked about Lamar Brown, 5-star defensive lineman / offensive lineman. I think Texas A&M is going to push. I don't know how much more they're going to push. I think they've made it very clear, hey, you should come here for these reasons. You just saw it on Saturday night. Up to you, man. I think Mike Elko, Derek Miller and that staff, I think what also makes them unique is they're just going to move to the next thing, right? Like they are not going to waste their time. Tank Jones is a player to know for a majority of these schools we're going to mention. Edge rusher out of Alabama, borderline 5-star prospect, going to be in the conversation. He is a longtime Oregon commit. He's been to Miami. He's been to Texas A&M since the season started, but I think he's the closest thing to Ruben Bain in this cycle. He is big. He is thick. He can get around the corner. You can put him on ball, off ball. Really love what Tank Jones has done as a senior there in Mobile. Big fan of him. Everyone seems to be thinking the same thing because Texas A&M, Oregon, and Miami, I think, are all point of attack focused programs and operations right now. So he's one to keep an eye on. Braylon Womack, 5-star safety out of Mississippi. This was the Gatorade Player of the Year last year. The player comp has long been Caleb Downs for him. Now, Braylon Womack has dealt with some injuries as a senior, but he can do a little bit of everything on the back end. His recruitment's been kind of all over the place. Texas A&M was in there very early. Now, Texas A&M likes the safeties that they have committed. They got a really good one in Tylen Wilson out of Mississippi. So, certainly it seems like Texas A&M is positioning themselves to bust out that spatula. They like what they have in the class. Starts at the point of attack. Tristan Givens, Bryce Perry-Wright, 2 5-star pass rushers. So they are one to watch, and they are going to parlay this on-field success into success in the living rooms of top recruits.
And like, what a perfect year for A&M to do this too. Obviously, Texas had so much recruiting momentum, coming off last year. Texas Tech just, firing the money can and doing a nice job on some evaluations as well. And for A&M to come here, like, actually, we're that team. And also, we're going to knock LSU out of the race and make them go into a coaching search. One that, like, if they're going after Lane Kiffin, might extend well past signing day. Like, man, that is you could have not timed this better if you are the Aggies. They certainly did. So I'm looking forward to see how they close. Speaking of close, let's get to the evaluation of the week here. A guy that I know we saw a good bit in some 7-on-7 stuff from the Northeast. Receiver KJ Duff, who, man, like, just watching him in person, I don't want to step on here, but, like, is he a receiver? Is he going to grow into a tight end? Like, athletically, like, I don't think he was, like, freaky fast, but he did make a lot of plays in 7-on-7. A guy who just kind of kept, like, oh, yeah, all right, like, that guy, he catches it well. He gets himself open, like, good body control guy. But he's blossomed into a lot better for Rutgers than I thought he was going to be.
KJ Duff against Purdue. I didn't have eyes on this game, but I watched the PFF cut up. 6 catches, 241 yards, and 1 touchdown as Rutgers rallied to beat Purdue. But average 40.2 yards per catch. I've never seen that for a receiver that had, like, more than 4 catches. Like, that is insane. KJ Duff now leads the Big Ten in receiving yards, 761 on the season. Mekhi Lemons behind him. Jeremiah Smith's behind him. Carnell Tate's behind him. A guy I had a ton of exposure to, KJ Duff. And we went back and forth about, hey, should it be a 4-star prospect? He finishes as a 3-star. He finished as the number 28 tight end in the country, the number 1 player in New York. We weren't the only ones that misread KJ Duff because everyone passed on him. This is a kid that had Tennessee involved, Florida State was involved, Miami was involved, Florida was involved, Penn State was involved. Penn State, which has a ton of issues at wide receiver, I think they could use a KJ Duff. Syracuse, all those schools were involved with KJ Duff, but no one was ready to pull the trigger really besides Rutgers. And that's why he ended up in Piscataway. I think what everyone had was hung up on was the 40 time. I mean, he was a 4.78 guy. In hindsight, he was doing that at 200 pounds. He always made contested catches. And Bud, I bring up KJ Duff because, transfer portal window, 2 months away. This is going to be a guy that is going to have plenty of suitors if he elects to enter was talking with some people inside his camp a few days ago. A CFP contender, I'm not going to name the school, tried to poach KJ Duff last cycle. Rutgers paid up. Well, Greg Schiano, Scarlet Knights, they're going to have to do it again because these big-bodied X's, they carry a ton of value in the transfer portal. So kudos to Rutgers for not overthinking it with KJ Duff. Shame on all of us for overthinking it with KJ Duff. And just an awesome kid to see kind of blossom in one of the Big Two conferences.
I mean, like awesome for Rutgers. Like Callie McManus is playing pretty well this year as well. He was like one of PFF's leading quarterbacks, which is nice to see because like there were times when he was pretty rough before, and a story of continued development there. Yeah, I mean Rutgers is probably gonna have a fight on their hand to hold on to him, but also if you're him, like, why not stay? Like they're clearly building the offense around you. You're leading the Big Ten in receiving. It's not like you're going to go somewhere and get a lot more exposure, right? Like you're going to continue to get an absolute ton of targets there for the Scarlet Knights. Man, 5 weeks to signing day. I am absolutely pumped. This is a whole lot of fun. We'll do it again next week, and Ivins, I appreciate it, man.
Of course, bud. Hey, everything is moving fast, right? Like I mentioned, A&M is gonna close strong. I'd keep an eye on Oregon, keep an eye on Miami. Mario Cristobal and that staff, they're trending for Milan Paris, a big 6'5" wide receiver that's kind of in the same mold as KJ Duff, maybe a little bit faster. Ohio State sitting number 9 in the recruiting class rankings right now. And from my perspective, I think Ohio State is making the best senior season evaluations out of any operation in the country. Not surprised, Mark Pantoni, the GM there, but they're going to get things rolling as well. So a lot of schools capitalizing on some uneasy waters for a lot of other schools.
Absolutely. I've enjoyed it, man.
Appreciate you, bud.